Well, Borderlands has been successful enough as a game series to get multiple entries, but will it survive entering the world of film with the same kind of strength? I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for Borderlands reads, based on the best-selling video game, this all-star action-adventure follows a ragtag team of misfits on a mission to save a missing girl who holds the key to unimaginable power. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the game series, in a nutshell, there's this planet called Pandora that's kind of post-apocalyptic, but somewhere in its ruins is fabled technology left behind by an alien race on whom, all technology of human history has been based, or something like that. So everyone's trying to get this awesome fabled technology, this remnant from this race, because it'll give them all power. It's just the big thing they're all after, right? And I played a little of the three main games, a couple hours at most of each. None of them fully hooked me in, mostly for gameplay reasons. But I want to be clear that I'm not coming at this review for this movie as a fan with expectations based on the games. And adherence to the source material means nothing to me here. The question I'm asking myself is, okay, is this something that I like for just what it is, what's being presented to me? Not, is it faithful to the games? So I can understand other people wanting that kind of a review. That's not the kind of review I'm going to be presenting. The too long didn't read, I guess, might be that it felt like a kid's movie that was too violent to be a kid's movie. The craziness of the world just felt like a tone being pursued instead of the outgrowth of a world that had been thought through. In Mad Max, for example, which I think is a little bit of an appropriate comparison, kind of post-apocalyptic-y, people are just living in the remnants of human civilization, and everyone is just giving into their base desires of greed and whatever they want to go after, So it has some things. I mean, clearly, so many post-apocalyptic stories are inspired by Mad Max. But in Mad Max, the insanity of characters works with the outlandish clothes and the makeup that they're wearing, because there's a justification for how those things are connected, why their behavior is an outgrowth or is a reference point in some way for why they're choosing to dress the way they are, put on their skin what they're putting on in terms of makeup or spray paint or whatever. But here in Borderlands, people live in these junky or kind of pseudo post-apocalyptic feeling environments. But then they also will have super stylized hair, like the character Lilith, played by Cate Blanchett. Or they'll have elements of clothes that are just really fitted, tailored for their body type, or other standout elements that just aren't quite justified. I mean, more than not quite. I think not remotely justified. Characters also seem overly adjusted to their very extreme circumstances of almost constant, life and death, and just this horrible world that people are living in. I was never concerned that they were in danger or that actions would truly cost them anything. It would have helped me, I think, if this movie was allowed to be brutally violent. And for at least some characters to be truly alarmed and panicked by such violence. But I assume they wanted a PG-13 rating to just get more butts in the seats, despite this being an adaptation of an M-rated game series. The dialogue also felt very standard and familiar, just kind of very movie-like, including some present-day expressions, like the idea of ghosting someone, that felt pedestrian in this otherwise crazy-looking future world or alternate reality or whatever it's supposed to be. I felt also ahead of almost every punchline, whether that was a punchline delivered in dialogue or by something that suddenly happens. I was like a beat ahead of every one of those moments, like, oh, it's something like this. Yep, something like this, and it was. Very soon in this movie, I felt extremely bored, and for most of the experience, I just felt like I was waiting to leave the theater. As far as the performances go, I actually think all the actors did fine. But I didn't like the tone that they were directed to have in their performances. It's a tonal choice. Some of it's editing, too, I suppose. Most of the performances were just slightly overstated compared to, say, a drama. And you might say, well, Peter, it's not a drama, it's a comedy. But that doesn't mean that performances need to be or should be overstated. What would have been funnier to me is if their acting style was more subtle and serious then some of the punchlines would have felt more outrageous or unexpected for them to say. But with the performance style syncing up with the simplicity of the dialogue and the humor, it felt like just kind of one flavor, one volume, one dynamic throughout. And that's just one suggested change they could have made that would have taken them closer to something. I'm not saying that, that would have fixed all the problems and stuff, or helped some of the other issues that I have problems with. I will say, though, that in casting, I think I would have preferred a lead actress who has not spent their career trying to continue looking young. Cate Blanchett has really been like a leading lady kind of actress, and not like a character actor. Character actors usually don't have to worry about their weight as much or their appearance as much. It's okay for them to be less attractive looking, but her career is built on a mode in Hollywood where she needs to try and remain attractive and young looking. And she's done a really nice job of taking care of herself, and they only helped her with makeup and wardrobe. So despite being in her mid-50s, she did not read to me like someone who should be making comments about how old she is and how she's getting too old for things. Or for another character early on to refer to her as crusty. I'm like, really? I'd actually prefer to see Jamie Lee Curtis take a crack at the Lilith role in this movie instead of the part that she played. And I also would have preferred younger casting for Tina. Tina in this movie would have been more likely to be funny to me, I think, if she was around 10 years old or a little younger, which would, I think, better play up the contrast of like her youthfulness, and therefore we would assume a sort of innocence about her. But then that would be contrasted with her violent behavior and sometimes insane, seemingly, antics. But with a teenager in this role, she just gave me vibes of an overly dramatic, self-absorbed, and immature person that just needs to grow up. So I think while the actress did a fine job, it was a casting issue. I would have preferred a much younger actress playing Tina. I also think Jack Black's voice performance as Claptrap, while a fine imitation of the original from what little exposure I've had, was totally unnecessary and feels very much like a marketing choice to get his name on the ads. It says in the IMDb description, an all-star cast. I'm like, well, I don't think that's really what was going to best help tell this story, is the all-star cast that you chose, as solid as they all are as actors. So I think they could have saved money on Jack Black's fee and put a little bit more into the visual effects, which just transitions into my thoughts on those. Very standard, with unfortunately some, but not constantly, obvious green screen here and there, but still solid enough to present the world, which was interesting and engaging to look at. I think also there were some really nice sets, practical sets that fed into the development and presentation of that world. Even if there were a few costume pieces and props that felt a little bit like they were out of a Power Rangers episode. So some inconsistency there, but certainly some great things going on too. The stunt work, though, was possibly most noticeable to me as feeling off. First off, the choreography I didn't feel like was all that elaborate or interesting and stuff, but in particular, there were some times where Cate Blanchett was firing a gun that just didn't look real or right to me compared to other movies. Now, yes, these are strange sci-fi guns with who knows what rules of physics, but still the recoil just looked overdone a number of times from what I would expect, to the point where it felt just a little bit like dance choreography to me, just slightly overdone. And maybe they were going for something stylized in that, and that's legitimate to make stylistic choices like that. It's just not a style that helped my experience of this movie, like many other, presumably, I would assume, stylistic or tonal choices made in this movie, which I've already talked about. Okay, so themes. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance in the themes of this thing that could trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Maybe just a little bit. There's twice mentioned this idea that there's no salvation without sacrifice. And of course, that has some thematic sounding, some philosophical stuff, certainly in very broad and loose ways would point to Christianity in some sense. But I don't think that's intentional. I think there's so much about the sacrifice of Jesus that's made its way into all kinds of fiction, so that everybody's a Jesus character if there's someone that's sacrificing themselves, So I don't think there's anything to mine from that. Oddly enough, what stuck out to me more than that was two sentiments that I think are both related to contentment, and both popped up near the end of the movie. One is that a character discovers that they are not special in the way that they thought. But they are still validated as being special. And I think that's something that's important for all of us to realize. We may have an idea in our minds of what God made us for, what God-given strengths we have, what God wants us to be about doing in this life that is particular compared to maybe what he has other people, doing in this life. But those estimations of ourselves can turn out to be wrong very easily. And then what do we do in that moment when we are not really seemingly supposed to be or equipped to be on the path that we thought we were supposed to be on, where we're not finding success or advancement in what we thought we were supposed to be doing? Is that in that moment a blow to our worth, our value, our sense of purpose? So I think that's a worthwhile thing to consider, that very often, although each of us are immensely valuable as image bearers of God, we may not have the particular purposes in our lives that we thought we did. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, the villain is also said in a derogatory way, or in kind of like not a teaching moment kind of way, but I mean it's definitely kind of a moral lesson type of moment. The villain is said to never have enough. One character says, I have what you will never have, enough. And so I think that speaks to contentment as well. And of course it's easy to look at the villain and say, oh, he wants wealth and he wants power and stuff. But I mean, if we take away those kind of more just kind of average villain motivations, we can see in ourselves another flavor of that, where there's something more we want. Maybe we want recognition or promotion to a certain level in our career, or something else in life that we think is going to be enough, that's going to get us to the place where we're going to feel fulfilled and satisfied with life. But if we're looking for circumstances in this life to bring us that sense of enough, and contentment, then we are setting ourselves up for disappointment, frustration, and maybe far worse feelings and outlooks than that. So still, these are small beats, and I think you have to kind of be tuned in and looking for things like this to really see them as opportunities in this movie for an opportunity for reflection. But I think they are there and worth mentioning. All right, no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip. Tonally, this is for a totally different audience than you. If I were to guess, younger, early teens that are playing and liking Borderlands, who are hopefully getting permission to play those M-rated games, I think they have a much better chance of liking this one than you. This one is rated PG-13 for intense sequences of violence and action, language, and some suggestive material. And those are all of my thoughts for now on Borderlands. Right now, I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rap. The lyrics gonna never change, but the melody gets rearranged. Aren't you glad it gets rearranged? Or otherwise, you'd never get whatever this is that's happening. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate. Dan Exhale, Gable Stinson, Nolan D. Branham, Winston Crutchfield, Winston Crutchfield Libre, Justin D. Maya, Joel Nelson, and Scroffosaurus. Thank you for supporting me and SBP and CGC. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name in song? And check out our page on Patreon. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible and actually voting on this review. I gave two choices. I was 50-50 on watching and reviewing either one, and the majority ended up going this route. So thank you guys. You can get info about the benefits of becoming a patron at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then as always, I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.